Why do people do the things that they do? I've studied behavioral psychology for more than 40 years. I've studied economics for 3 decades to try to figure out why people behave the way they do. And I've come to the conclusion that each person has certain characteristics which are called human nature. Whenever you hear somebody say, well, that's just human nature, well, that's what they're talking about.
Among the many voices that have shaped modern thinking on success and personal development, there is one that stands out not because of mystery, but because of clarity. Brian Tracy. His work does not rely on abstract philosophy or symbolic interpretation. It is grounded in action, discipline, and repeatable patterns of behavior. Yet beneath this practical surface lies something deeper, a structure, a system of habits that quietly determines the direction of a human life. Success in this view is not an event. It is not luck, talent, or a sudden breakthrough. It is the result of invisible routines repeated daily, often without recognition. And this is where the real transformation begins. Not in grand gestures, but in small, consistent actions that accumulate over time. But there is something most people misunderstand about habits. They assume habits are automatic outcomes of personality. In reality, habits are engineered. And if they are not consciously designed, they are unconsciously inherited. This is the first hidden truth. Your current life is not random. It is the visible expression of your invisible habits. And this raises an uncomfortable question. If habits shape everything, then why do most people fail to build the right ones? The invisible architecture of success. At the core of Brian Tracy's philosophy lies a simple but often ignored principle. You become what you repeatedly do, not occasionally, not when you feel motivated, but consistently, even when there is no immediate reward. This is where the structure begins to reveal itself. Every habit functions like a silent instruction to the mind. When repeated enough times, it bypasses conscious resistance and becomes automatic. The brain no longer questions it, it simply executes. This is what makes habits powerful, but it is also what makes them dangerous, because the same mechanism that builds discipline can also build stagnation. Most people operate on habits they did not choose. Waking up late, procrastinating, avoiding discomfort. These patterns are not accidents. They are learned responses reinforced over time, and unless interrupted, they become permanent. But here is where the shift occurs. Brian Tracy emphasizes that successful individuals do not rely on willpower alone.
Well, life is also made up of the amount of energy you have to expend. And since everybody thinks economically, they call human beings Homo economicus. We all think economically. We try to conserve the amount of time and energy you spend on any element of their life.
They construct habits that eliminate the need for willpower. They create systems that guide behavior even when motivation fades. And this is where many people begin to struggle. Because building a habit requires something most are not prepared for. Repetition without immediate results. The habit of clarity. Before action, there is direction, and before direction, there is clarity. One of the foundational habits Tracy emphasizes is the habit of defining clear goals. Not vague desires, not abstract wishes, but precise written objectives. This may seem simple, but it carries a deeper implication. When a goal is clearly defined, the mind begins to organize itself around it. Attention filters change. Decisions become easier. Distractions lose their power. Without clarity, effort becomes scattered. With clarity, effort becomes focused. Picture this. 2 people want to lose weight. One writes, lose 10 kilograms by December 31st. Go 3 times to the gym per week. The other says, I want to get fit. Guess who succeeds? Clarity wins every time, but there is a hidden tension here. Most people avoid clarity because it forces confrontation. When you define a goal, you also define what you are not doing. You expose your current position. And for many, this creates discomfort. So they remain vague. They say they want success, but they never specify what success means. And without that definition, no habit can align properly. But once clarity is established, something else becomes necessary. A mechanism to act on it. The discipline of daily action. Clarity without action is illusion. And this is where the next habit emerges, the habit of daily disciplined action. Brian Tracy often speaks about the importance of doing what is necessary, even when it is uncomfortable, especially when it is uncomfortable, because discomfort is not a sign of failure. No, it is a signal of growth. Yet this is exactly where most people break. They wait for motivation, they wait to feel ready, they delay action until conditions seem perfect. But perfection never arrives, and in that delay, opportunities disappear. But there is something deeper happening beneath the surface. When you act despite resistance, you are not just completing a task, you are rewiring your identity. You are teaching your mind that action is not dependent on emotion, and over time this becomes automatic. But there is a moment, often unnoticed, where this process either strengthens or collapses. And that moment is when resistance is at its highest. The battle with procrastination. Procrastination is not laziness, it is avoidance. Avoidance of difficulty, uncertainty, or failure. Where Brian Tracy identifies this as one of the greatest barriers to success. Not because people lack ability, but because they delay execution. But there is a specific pattern here that most overlook. The more you delay a task, the heavier it becomes psychologically. It accumulates pressure, it occupies mental space, and eventually it creates a sense of overwhelm that makes action even less likely. This is the loop. Delay creates pressure, pressure creates avoidance, and avoidance reinforces delay. That task you delay, it starts as 30 minutes in your head. By Friday, it's 3 hours of mental torture. Brian Tracy's fix: start now. Even 2 minutes, momentum takes over. Breaking this loop requires a specific habit, starting immediately, even if the action is small, even if it is imperfect, because starting dissolves resistance. It transforms the abstract into the concrete, and once movement begins, momentum follows. But here's the part most people don't expect. Starting is not the hardest part. Continuing is. The power of consistency. Consistency is often misunderstood as intensity, but they are not the same. Intensity is short-lived. It relies on emotion. Consistency is stable. It relies on structure. Brian Tracy emphasizes that long-term success is not built on bursts of effort, but on sustained repetition. Small actions, repeated daily, eventually produce massive results. But there is a psychological challenge hidden within this process. Progress is often invisible in the beginning. You work, you repeat, you improve slightly, but the results do not appear immediately. And this creates doubt. Many people stop here, not because the process is ineffective, but because the reward is delayed. But this is exactly where the advantage lies. Those who continue despite the lack of visible progress eventually reach a threshold, a point where the accumulated effort begins to compound. And when that happens, the results appear sudden. But they are not sudden. They are the product of sustained consistency, and yet, even with consistency, something else is required. A way to adapt. The habit of continuous learning. The world does not remain static, and neither can the individual. One of the habits Brian Tracy consistently reinforces is the habit of continuous learning. Reading, studying, improving skills, because knowledge expands awareness, and awareness improves decision-making. But there is a deeper layer to this. Learning is not just about acquiring information, it is about updating perception. It changes how you interpret reality. It reveals opportunities that were previously invisible. But there is a risk here. Information without application becomes distraction. Many people consume knowledge endlessly without implementing it. They feel productive, but nothing changes. This creates an illusion of progress. True learning, according to Tracy's framework, is measured by application, by behavior change, by results. And this leads to another critical habit. The environment of success habits do not exist in isolation. They are influenced by environment, the people you interact with, the information you consume, the standards you observe. Brian Tracy emphasizes the importance of surrounding yourself with individuals who reflect the habits you want to develop. Because behavior is contagious. If your environment normalizes discipline, growth becomes easier. If it normalizes stagnation, progress becomes difficult. But there is a subtle dynamic at play. Changing your environment often requires leaving familiar spaces, and this creates resistance, because familiarity feels safe even when it is limiting. Yet without this shift, habits struggle to evolve because the environment constantly reinforces old patterns. And this raises a final, more complex challenge: the internal resistance to change. Even with clarity, discipline, consistency, learning, and environment, there is still one obstacle that remains: internal resistance. A quiet force that questions progress, that introduces doubt, that seeks comfort over growth. This resistance is not external, it comes from within. It is the voice that says, "Wait until tomorrow. You're not ready. This is too difficult." And if left unchallenged, it becomes the dominant narrative. Brian Tracy's approach does not ignore this resistance. It confronts it. By replacing passive thinking with active decision-making, by choosing action over hesitation, by reinforcing habits until they override doubt. But this process is not immediate. It requires repetition, awareness, persistence, and over time, something begins to change. The same mind that once resisted growth begins to support it. The final integration success, in the end, is not a mystery. It is a structure, a system of habits aligned with clear goals, executed with discipline, sustained through consistency, refined through learning, supported by environment, and protected against internal resistance. But there is one final realization that often goes unnoticed. These habits do not just produce external success, they transform the individual, they reshape identity, they redefine what feels normal. And this is where the deepest shift occurs. Because once these habits are fully integrated, success is no longer something you pursue. It becomes something you naturally express. If this perspective resonates with you, take a moment to reflect. Which of these habits are already present in your life, and which ones are missing? The answer to that question may reveal more than any external strategy ever could. And if you want to go deeper into ideas like this, consider subscribing. Because understanding the structure behind success is not just useful, it may be the difference between intention and transformation.